Okay, welcome folks. We call the meeting to order. It's about 6:35. We'll start out with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will move to general public comment on non-agenda matters that are within the council's purview. If you have any comments and you're on Zoom, could you please use your raised hand button to do so? And we'll start with the audience. Anyone in the audience have any public comments? Josh?
Good.
You're good for now? Okay. All right, we'll move to Zoom. Anyone on Zoom have any public comments? Hearing none, we will move to item number item number 4, which is the election of the City Council President. Entertain nominations.
Motion to make a nomination for Chad Spooner.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Chad Spooner
Have a nomination, right?
for the nomination of Council President. Really would like to get another nomination.
You don't like me correcting you all the time? Is that it?
Are you good with that, Chad?
I'm good with that.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, all those in favor of Chad being the City Council President for another year, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, Chad, you're City Council President for 1 more year.
Thank you, sir.
You need to update your resume. We'll move on to item number 4, which is an overview of our FY21 audit. You must be Zach.
I am.
Zach, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Tom's going to join you as well. Thank you for the audit.
Excuse me.
So we will turn it over to you, and then we will probably open up for questions when you're done.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a presentation with us here tonight, PowerPoint, so tonight we're going to basically just kind of go through the results of operations here for the City of St. Albans. But before I begin, I'd actually like to extend a quick thank you to Tom, Sharon, and everybody here in the city that was involved in the audit. An audit process is not a small undertaking. If you look, it's over a 100-page report that's compiled together by Sharon and Tom. They were well prepared for us, very easy to work with, and the records were in good order. So I just wanted to say a quick thank you on the outset of this presentation. Next slide. So the agenda for tonight, we're going to go have a brief overview of what the fiscal year 2021 audit results were. We're going to talk about the financial statement audit process, including some rule-setting agencies. I'll walk you through the different types of reports that have been issued. We'll go through the annual comprehensive financial report, which is otherwise known as the ACFR, available in a little bit of detail, and then we'll go over the management other comments. So a brief overview of the audit results. It was another successful audit year. The audit documentation was provided by the city in a very timely manner to us. There were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, and I'll talk about that maybe a bit more later in our presentation. We did have a couple of recommendations, but again, I'll talk about that maybe a bit more towards the end of the presentation. So the financial statement audit process, it's management's function to ensure that the assets are being appropriately safeguarded, implementing those safeguards, and then also ensure that there's proper financial reporting. As auditors, our opinion or our function is to express an opinion on those financial statements, in which are the responsibility of management. So a financial statement audit involves us performing procedures to obtain a level of assurance about the audit evidence that are presented in your financial statements, as well as the no disclosures in your financial statements. And then finally, no opinion is expressed on the effectiveness of the town's internal controls. However, we do get an understanding of those controls, and we also do some testing. We generally do that during the summertime of the vendor transactions, payroll transactions, to make sure that the internal controls here at the city are operating effectively. Next slide. So the rule-setting agencies, there are quite a few of them. The first one is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or what's also known as GASB. This is a nationwide body that establishes the form and the content of the financial statements, and then GASB also provides standards on how to prepare the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, otherwise known as GAAP. And then some recent GASB standards include the following. The first one is GASB 84, and that deals with custodial funds. And this was actually a fairly big change to your financial statements. So if you have the financial statements in front of you, if you turn to pages 38 and 39, you'll see there that's where the big impact of your GASB 84 was this year. It was implemented, and again, it was done nationwide by all municipalities. And if you see on page 39, you'll see that there is some additions and deductions in relation to your custodial funds. And the biggest one is actually the taxes and fees collected on behalf of the Maple Run School. This is the big change in your financial statements this year. So in the past, all the taxes and fees, the taxes that were collected on behalf of the Maple Run School and then turned over to the Maple Run School were all run through a liability account and weren't explicitly shown in your financial statements. So what GASB 84 is doing is just providing some clarity for what's been happening for the town for the city for a number of years. So the city's always collected these taxes on behalf of the Maple Run School, and then those taxes that are collected, they're turned right over to the Maple Run School, and that was always kind of buried in your financial statements through a liability account. But GASB 84 is kind of showing that, providing some clarity on that transactions that are happening here in the city. Again, it's not anything new that the city's doing, it's just a financial statement presentation item that's new.
And one quick thing I want to point out, you see that 7.1 million for Maple Run. I get pretty regularly questions about people who pay their taxes and they want to pay them online for free. A couple years ago, we made water and sewer payments for free. So the fee to the city for online payments varies depending on the amount, but it's about 2%, 2.5%. So if we made school taxes free and presumably everyone paid online, you get 140 grand for the city for just the school portion. If we added in our municipal tax, it would be another 120. So to make online tax payments free is a pretty big expense if we ever went that route.
I just have to quick question. The number seems small to me, because Maple Run's total budget is 68 million.
Yeah, this is just the city portion.
And then there's the state chips in too.
So the town pays Maple Run.
Right, no, I get that.
Fairfield pays Maple Run, plus all the state payments. So this is the portion that passes through the city's books.
I guess I thought we just funneled the money to the state and then they paid it, so I just thought it'd be more than that.
We pay Maple Run directly.
Okay, moving on, there's also GASB 87, which will need to be implemented next year. And GASB 87 primarily deals with leases. We'll be in communication with Tom and Sharon here in April and May to ensure that the town is going to be ready for that implementation of that GASB 87 to ensure that there's no hang-ups with the June 30, 2022 audit. And then finally, there's your generally accepted governmental auditing standards, otherwise known as GAGAS. And this is, otherwise known as GAGAS and Yellow Book, and this outlines some audit requirements for professional qualifications for auditors and audit organizational quality control. So within our firm, there's actually a separate partner. My partner Alina was unable to be here tonight, but there's actually another partner who reviews all the work papers and the financial statements, so it goes through multiple levels of our partner review within our firm. Next slide. So the reports that are issued, we do issue an opinion on your annual comprehensive financial report. We do issue a management letter, which again we'll get into a bit later. We issue a governance letter, which is basically just a standard form of communication to let you know if there was any disagreements, which there were none, or if there was any, material audit adjustments, which there were none. There is the TIF AUP report, that's currently pending, and sorry, it looks like we got lost. So Tom and I will be working over the next couple of weeks to get the ball rolling on that one, but it is due April 15th. And then finally, there is the single audit report that is generally due on March 31st, but the federal government issued an automatic 6-month extension to all municipalities, so it's actually not due now until September 30th of 2022. In talking with Tom, we anticipate doing that one in the late spring, early summertime to ensure that it's submitted to the federal government in time for their deadline.
And the single audit is a requirement if you get at least $750,000 in federal funds, which we do every year, mostly thanks to Chip.
Chip's fault.
So an overview of the Act for pages 1 through 7 is your introductory section. The independent auditor's report can be found on page 13 through 15. The town did receive an unmodified opinion, and this is the best opinion that you can receive from an independent auditing firm. And it's the same opinion that the city has received in prior audits as well. Management discussion and analysis takes place on pages 16 through 29. And this just provides like a narrative summary of the results of operation, or really allows the users to get a good understanding of what's going on here at the city. There's dual perspective financial statements. There's the government-wide financial statements, which are a long-term financial view for the city. And then there's the fund financial statements, which is a short-term financial view for the city. And the big difference between those two is the government-wide financial statements includes all the long-term assets and long-term liabilities, whereas the fund basis does not include any of those long-term assets or long-term liabilities. Then you have the notes to the financial statements as well as the required supplementary information. And then you have your supplementary information, and these are primarily your combining schedules, again, to provide a bit more clarity about the individual funds here in the city. And then finally, you have your statistical section, which is at the end, which gives you 10 years of financial history here in the city of St. Albans.
And just quick point out, the management discussion and analysis is, aside from the numbers, really critical part because it gives some context to the numbers, and the biggest thing to our books every year is that according to the rules we have to live by, we have to account for the TIF debt, but we cannot account for future TIF revenues, which we know will be there. So that's hugely important context, because that's 15, 20 million bucks coming in over the next decade. We just can't account for it until it's here, but we know it's coming.
So the first chart that we're going to go through tonight is your unassigned fund balance. As you can see in fiscal year 2021, that far right side, there's a blue, and then there's also a kind of a gray. And that blue makes up your redevelopment. Now that redevelopment portion is your redevelopment fund as well as your sales proceeds fund. And that had a balance of $415,000 in unassigned fund balance. And then you see your operating, which is your general fund. That had a balance of $566,000, which is a total unassigned general fund balance of $981,000. As you can see, it's actually a big increase from the prior year. The prior year was actually at a deficit of $169,000. That's a change of about $1.2 million from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21. Now this change is primarily due to the results of operation when looking at your budgeted revenues and expenditures to your actual to your actual revenues and expenditures. And we'll get into that a bit more later, but just remember that there is a very large swing in your unassigned fund balance from fiscal year 20 as a deficit to a positive number in fiscal year 2021, and it was primarily due to the results of your budgetary results of operation, which again we'll get into in a future slide. So the unassigned fund balance is actually on page 32, and it's actually probably the most important figure in your financial statements. So back in 2018, the city actually adopted a policy for a minimum unassigned fund balance. And that policy that the city adopted in 2018 said about 1 month of operating expenditures. So 1 month of operating expenditures is about 8.3%. So in fiscal year 2021, when comparing your unassigned fund balance to operating expenditures, it's at 10.8%. So that means that as of June 30, 2021, the city exceeded their fund balance policy by about 2.5%, which is a good financial position for the city to be in.
And we have, if you went back and look at a 10-year history, our general fund has a history of being up and down. And that's because the city has a history of getting involved in redevelopment projects, and mostly due to sometimes the large swings that go with financing those projects in the front end. So a good way to think of it is where we always have really strong liquidity and we make it work for us.
Next slide. So this next slide shows the components of your general fund balance. The first you'll see is in the tan is your non-expendable fund balance. That non-expendable fund balance is comprised of your prepaid expenditures, inventories, and assets held for resale. You actually see it was actually a pretty stark decrease from the prior year. It was at $876,000 in fiscal year 20, and it decreased to about $275,000 in fiscal year 21. That was primarily due to the sale of 195 Federal Street, as well as in fiscal year 20, there were some advances from the general fund to cover some deficits in other funds that did not happen in fiscal year 21, which is why you see that decrease in your non-spendable fund balance. On the blue, it's very small, but that actually had an increase of about $40,000 this year. And if you see that note right at the bottom, in fiscal year 21, the restricted fund balance that we're showing there also includes a committed fund balance of about $38,000. Now, that committed fund balance is new to the city in fiscal year 21, wasn't there in 19 or 20. What makes up that committed fund balance is actually the local option tax that has been earmarked for recreation. That's not close to your unassigned fund balance, it's sitting in a committed fund balance based upon the way that that local option tax was voted on by the city. So those funds have been earmarked for recreation in the future, so they're just being segregated out, which is why you see that increase in that restricted fund balance.
And that's, that tax was only available to us for 9 months of the year, so that number's gonna get pretty big pretty quick.
And then I touched on the unassigned fund balance, which is in your purple, but again, you can see that it goes from a deficit 168 to a positive 981,000, which is a very positive swing and change for the city in fiscal year 21. So the next slide is your budgetary versus actual results, and this is what I was kind of talking about with the primary reason for that increase in your unassigned fund balance. So you can see in that very first line item, you have your revenues, had a budget of revenues of about 9.7 million. Well, the city actually received revenues of 9.8 million, which means that your revenues exceeded the budget, or you beat the budget by on the revenue side by about 81,000 or about 82,000, which is a good position for the city to be in. Right below that, you'll see your expenditures. Again, you have an offsetting budget, a budget to zero. So your expenditures were the same as the revenues at 9.7 million. But expenditures came in less than what you anticipated by. So it came in about 9 million, which leads to favorable turnbacks. So the expenditures were less than what you anticipated by about 757,000. So in total, the city, what I call, beat the budget by about 839,000. Now the largest piece of that was police, and I'll turn it over to Tom to kind of talk about that for a little bit.
So the last few years, the challenge was police payroll, and that was a drag on the budget the last few years. Last year that did not occur, and then we did well, and we're continuing to do well with respect to the renovation project. And so the borrowing needs for that project are less than we anticipated.
Next slide. This slide is your TIF, debt service major funds. And what's important to note here, if you look at that far right column, you'll see that in blue, the total expenditures for the TIF debt service fund were about $3.8 million. But right below that in the gray is what your revenues are. Your revenues make up your property taxes as well as your transfers in, and that was at about $1.2 million. So it was actually at a loss this year of about $188,000. And in total, if you look at page 33, you'll see that the TIF debt service fund is actually in a deficit position of about $362,000. Now this is something that came up during the audit and we sat down and talked with Tom about, and it's my understanding, and I'll turn it over to Tom here in a moment, that a future projected forecasting has been done on this fund, and that was approved by the VEPC, and that in year 2026, this fund will become in a positive position.
So the short way to think of the TIF at the end of the fiscal year was, the TIF on a net position was about $360,000 in the red, but that's all made up by future increment. And $360,000 is pretty low compared to our cash at the time, which was total of $7 million. So for $360,000 at zero interest, because our cash covers it, you get all this. So pretty darn good deal.
So Tom, were there projects that weren't completed yet where we weren't getting TIF increment from?
Yeah, that's always the case because it's based on where the status is as of April 1st.
Yeah.
So Congress in Maine wasn't fully on the books, it is this year, and that was the big one.
Okay.
But yeah, there's always that lag.
There's usually a 12 to 18 month lag between money out and increment in.
That's how it's all front loaded, so we have to spend the money right up out, so it looks really bad because we're paying debt on it, but it takes 12 to 18 months before we start making increment on it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that future forecasting out, do you know how far out it went, Tom?
It goes until all the debt is paid.
Okay.
Next slide. Another noteworthy change in your fiscal year 2021 act for is the city pool fund became a major fund. And that can be seen on pages, I believe 33, 32, and 33. And it's funded by multiple sources, but at the end of the year, it actually had a deficit balance of about $487,000, which is not uncommon for capital project funds. It's actually very common to have your capital project funds in a deficit position while the construction is going on. And that's because you don't know what the ultimate cost of those projects are going to be, so you wouldn't want to permanently finance those through a bond until the end of the project, so you know how much you actually have to finance. So it's actually covered by about a $5 million note, so that you have the cash on hand to fund those construction costs as the project goes on. Once the project is completed, that's when the city will permanently fund or permanently bond and permanently finance for that, and that's when that deficit position will go away. So it's not uncommon to have a deficit position for a capital project fund. It's actually very, very common.
So Congress in Maine, for example, finished June 30th with a deficit of about $800,000 even. That's done. So this year's books, when they're in front of you, that you won't even see Congress in Maine because it'll be zeroed out. The pool will be a major player, and some of the projects you're talking about in executive session will probably be on here.
So
But they always clear out.
is the pool still on budget, on time and on budget?
Pool's on time, pool's probably gonna have a shortfall of 200.
That's not too bad, I guess.
So, we got a number of ideas for how we retire that over time.
Okay.
So, that's a future meeting though.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So this is your water fund net position, or your equity in the water fund. It's on pages 35 through 37. So as you can see, it's actually been decreasing consistently since 2019 to 2021. It was down about $269,000 in the current year. And I'll turn it over to Tom here. He wanted to talk about the water fund a little bit.
So the enterprise funds need some reasonable net position in the end, and the reason they need that is because it's rare, but when problems happen at the water and sewer funds, they tend to be large, and they're not things that are covered by insurance, or things break at the water plant or the sewer plant. So we've been conscious of rates the last few years. So I guess I'm setting the stage to say that I don't think this upcoming year is going to be the year where I'm going to recommend to the city manager and we're going to bring a budget to you that has a 0% on water and sewer rates. You need to keep those funds healthy, and they're still healthy, but we want to keep them that way.
Next slide. Next slide is your wastewater fund. You can see that one is slightly increasing from 19 to 21. Remained largely unchanged. It was about a $5,000 loss this year. So that one was largely unchanged from 20 to 21. Next slide. The next slide is your restorative justice fund, and this can be seen on pages 89 and 90. These are funds that are on hold for Franklin County. Sitting in your non-major governmental funds, but again, 80 and 89, we provide that breakdown. As you can see that this fund seems to ebb and flow. There are no standalone financial statements, and there are funds kind of on hold for Franklin County. The city does a lot of it just basically does the accounting for this. So you can see that it's in a slight deficit position by about $27,000 at fiscal year end.
And this is all grant driven, so we try to manage it to be a zero. But there's 3 or 4 years ago it had a $100,000 surplus, and you spend down that surplus over time, and then you get a little deficit and you make it up through the grant process.
So it's really just a timing difference between the expenditure of grant funds and the receipt of grant funds. Next slide. This slide shows your long-term debt, your loans and your leases payable for the fiscal years ending 19, 20, and 21. You'll notice that between 20 and 21 for your business type, it decreased by about $1 million, and that was due to your principal payments on your bonds for your business type activities, which are your water and your wastewater funds. You'll see that governmental actually increased slightly by about $600,000, those items in the gray, and that was due to some issuance of some new debt in fiscal year 21. $1 million was for the TIF Fonda, and then another $1 million was for various items such as a plow, 12 Congress, and some sidewalks, as well as some payments down to that principal. So that's why you see that slight increase in that debt from fiscal year 20 to 21. Now, these numbers on the governmental side will increase when the city pool is permanently financed. You should see a fairly sizable increase in the amount of debt when that is ultimately permanently financed. And speaking with Tom, it sounds like maybe 2023, that fund would be permanently, that would be permanently bonded.
Not before, yeah.
Next slide, please. This slide shows your net pension liability, and there's two pieces to your net pension liability. You can see it's actually increasing over time, primarily due to VEMR's, and I'll get into why that is, but there is VEMR's as well as the city plan. So for VEMR's from 20 to 21, it's actually about a $1.5 million increase. Now that increase is due to a change in assumption from an actuarial perspective that the state made. And that change in assumption was the discount rate was at 7.5% in 20, and it decreased down to 7.0% in 21. And that's the primary reason for that $1.5 million increase in that liability associated with the city of St. Albans at the end of fiscal year 21. You'll see that actually the city plan, which is in gray, decreased by about $426,000 from 20 to 21. Now that decrease is primarily due to the results of operations for your investments exceeded what was expected and anticipated by the city by about $570,000. So those investment returns came in about greater than what the city anticipated by about $570,000, which consequently helped reduce that liability by about $426,000 during fiscal year 21. Next slide. So, in addition to proving out the numbers and the figures in the financial statements and making sure that the notes are correct, we do look at the internal controls here in the city. And if we had anywhere where improvements to those internal controls could be done, or what we would recommend them in a formal management letter. And if they were serious enough, they'd either be classified as a material weakness or significant deficiency. And there were no material weaknesses and there were no significant deficiencies that we identified for the fiscal year 21 audit. So there are 3 comments, and they're the same comments as the prior year. We didn't have any new findings or recommendations in the current year. They were for regular departmental internal audits. The second one was to recommend some improved controls over the user rights. And the final one was to implement a formal policy for the information technology. Next slide. And I think at this point that kind of concludes my presentation. So I'll open it up to questions and comments if that's okay with you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Zach, appreciate it. Anyone have any questions for Tom or Zach in this scenario?
I see we got the GFO certificate again. How many years in a row have we received that?
7 or 8.
So that's pretty good. I don't know if people realize what it takes to get that, so.
Sorry to interrupt, do you want to give an explanation of what it is?
So there's the GFOA, government financial, essentially the agency that involved with it helps sets the rules. You can submit your audit to them, and they do a review, which is actually through an audit firm, to essentially review your audit to make sure the quality of your financial statements is up to the award level. And every year they have comments on the audit that you've got to incorporate into the next year. So we've gotten that award for quite a long time now. I don't think a whole lot of municipalities in Vermont get that award. Off the top of my head, probably just a few. So we're in a pretty good company.
And just to kind of let you know, maybe provide a bit more guidance, a normal set of financial statements for a community this size might be 50 to 60 pages, but these financial statements are 115 pages, so it really adds a lot of additional information and clarity on your financial statements, and that doesn't happen without a lot of effort from Tom and his team pulling that information together to provide that information in your financial statements.
Thank you. I think we have Sharon back there, right?
Yes.
So thank you very much, Sharon. I know you don't get any TV time like Tom does. Thank you for all your work as well.
Tom, when we were talking about electronic payments before, I was wondering if there would be the same kind of fee impacts if we had the ability to process ACH payments and somebody could put in their bank account information.
So we can do that, and we have in the past sent out mailings to people with their bills to do that. So sure, people can call us up and we can get them set up for ACH at any time.
So I wonder is the demand for people to pay electronically about wanting to put it on a credit card, or is it about the inconvenience of wanting to like write a check, put a stamp on it? Because that's really what I wonder is.
I think neither.
It's points. They want us to pay $140,000 a year for people's airline miles.
260.
And it's convenience, and it's the way the world has become, but just from a business perspective, you know, like, think of the credit card miles you get in your taxes on your card.
Understood.
There's also I think a timing component. People will get a late notice, and just pick up the phone real quick, and if they can pay online, they're happy to pay online. So it's a good way for us, if we're going through a delinquency list, to deal with it quick. So there's some of that too.
So how much is a cent on our agreement? 33,000, 30, 33,
About 45?
45,
Yeah, so it'd be
5, 6 cents?
I mean, not everyone would do it if it was made free, but it'd be pretty hefty. You know, 5, 6 is probably a lot, but 2 or 3 for sure, and I think it would just grow over time. I'm not aware of anyone that allows that for free.
If you're serious about it, you really gotta bring the school on, because
No, I agree. I think just having the number, the 260,000 number, I mean, that's a big number. I mean, we're talking 2.5, 3 employees. So, you know, I just needed a number is what
but the context ought to be 260 over the city
in
and
the
school budget combined.
Yeah.
And you put most of it in there, because you weight it, right?
And the other side of the coin is we haven't seriously researched this with vendors at that level, and so maybe there's discounts the more you spend.
It's a big chunk of change.
How many employees do we have left that are not on meters?
We have 3 active employees not in Beamers, and 5 or 6 that are not employees, but they're vested, means they're planning on not taking a check yet.
Yeah.
So it's gonna run out.
Yeah.
So I think we just gotta continue that strategy of keep putting a little money into the plan for some years.
And we do that.
And we're gonna see ups and downs. You know, if it was June 30th today with the stock market, you know, we've lost some money, but it's a short-term hit, I think.
Zach, what was your opinion on our position with that?
As far as the funding position with,
Yeah.
so if you go, the page that I really like to look at is in your required supplementary information when I'm looking at retirement systems. The page I really like to look at is page 84. The reason I like page 84, kind of shows you what, excuse me, maybe not page 84, page 83, excuse me. Page 83 will tell you exactly what your total pension liability is for the city system, as well as what your fiduciary net position is, the funds that you've already put aside to help pay those future liabilities. You can see that you're at a percentage of about 61.8%, which is okay. It's certainly not the best that I've seen, but it's certainly not the worst I've seen. I'd say it's probably about in the middle, as a funding percentage of 61.8%.
And virtually unchanged since 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at our, like I said, we don't get credit for future investments into the fund. So when I do that math, we're at 100, where we reduce the contribution. So that 200K a year adds up pretty quick. And the other piece is we're almost to the point where, you know, the laws of large numbers don't apply. We've only got about 50 people taking a pension check. And we've got, you know, roughly $40,000 a month in benefit payments, but we've got, you know, 10 people that are 40% of that. So it's really driven sometimes by a few people.
Well, we're not gonna, you don't foresee us ever having a problem with that, even though we're low at 61% here?
No. No, that's on my list of financial concerns for the city. That's in the basement, tucked away.
which is the same place we were when we did that analysis 10 years ago. remember?
Yeah.
Mike?
So, the VEMR system is just in such better shape than the state teacher or the state employees retirement systems. It's a much more sustainable system in large part because the employee contributions are just so much higher as a percentage of the income. So, I don't have any heartburn about a 60% funded rate, having spent a lot of the last 2 years talking about pension systems that are falling apart, especially if we're continuing to make contributions on top of the base actuarially determined amount. So yeah, I agree after looking at those systems that are really tragically underfunded.
The takeaway is, you know, that 2 1/4, or what are we putting in?
210.
210, that's pretty sacrosanct, right? I mean, that's the most, it's not technically restricted, but it is the most restricted of you know, many of the other things we've looked at. 10 years from now, when Newell's on the council, Newell's mayor.
I don't think so. Not right yet.
How many do you say were drawing down pension checks?
About 50.
What was, I thought I saw a number of 700 something. Trying to find it again.
On page 83.
That's how much Tim wants to draw down.
About 50 people, and it's, right now, it's about $40,000 a month in total payments to those people.
Half a million a year.
I'll find that number, I'll get back to you.
It's 53 retired, so we're seeing it.
Any other questions for Zach or Tom? Everyone's good? We will, do we accept this? No, we don't have.
I think just our overview.
Yep. No need for action.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming in tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sharon, thank you very much as well.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you for coming in, Sharon.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Make a motion to appoint Joanne McGinn and Stina Booth to Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Second.
We have a motion and a second for the appointment of Joanne McGinn and Stina Booth.
Those are reappointments, right?
Yeah.
They're just, okay.
They were carryovers from the Park Commission to the Rec Commission. And I would recuse myself from that vote, being that one is a sibling. So, any other comments on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of appointing Joanne McGinn and Stina Booth to the Parks and Rec Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, both Joanne and Stina are appointed to the Parks and Rec Commission. We're now gonna move to the Albus Hill water tank loan. We've had this discussion multiple times about the need for the water tank up on Congress Street. Marty's been working hard on getting the proper easement and getting it out to bid here soon, so Tom, we'll turn it over to you.
So this is an application in front of you that would need signatures on for the full $2.3 million to build a water tank. This would be through the state revolving loan funds, which we've done a lot of business with for a long time. So it's a straight loan application. We don't know if there's any loan forgiveness or any grant component to this until it's all submitted. That being said, we've got a lot of that in recent years, and those funds have received a pretty substantial influx of federal cash, so we're really hopeful that we won't have to borrow $2.3 million. But the worst case scenario here is we borrow $2.3 million, we don't have to make a payment on it for 2 years at a really low interest rate. So this is the best tool available for us. We did spend some time with the USDA, but the funding on the federal level really hasn't become operational yet at the USDA, and so they suggested going down this road. So this is our plan of attack to get the tank built and funded.
So do we withdraw that full 2.3, or do we take it out as we need it?
We take it out as we need it, and they reimburse us for the bills.
Okay. I move that we approve the construction loan in the amount of 2.3 million from the state revolving loan fund for construction of the planned Albus water tank.
Second.
Motion seconded, motion by Chad, seconded by Mike. Any questions on this for Tom? I don't know, is Marty still on?
He is.
Yes, I am.
Oh, there. Marty, can you just give us a quick update on out to bid and timing?
We are hoping to get it out to bid by March 24th. And I spoke to Jason Booth last week. He's confident that we should be able to get some pretty competitive bids. So if that happens, we're hoping to break ground in May.
And the length of the project would be?
Majority of it would be done before cold weather sets in. And we would hope to finish it up early 2023.
And my last question is, will the residents see any interruption at any point, as far as you know?
If it is, it's going to be just maybe an hour or two while we switch over valves or something, but very minimal.
Okay.
Marty, one quick question. Does this include any funds for repairing the other tank if there is repairs that need to be done?
No, this is just for the build of the new tank. Once that new tank is up and online, we'll then be able to take the old tank offline and get some engineer studies done on it to determine to what extent it needs repairs.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions on this? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion online? Chip, any hands going up?
Seeing no hands.
Seeing no hands up on Zoom, all those in favor of approving the loan for 2.3 million with the state revolving loan fund, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, we approve, so that's going around, Tom, we're doing signatures.
Yeah.
Is it done? So there's
Okay.
Chip, I guess. We're moving on to item number 8, which is Tom again, we're keeping you busy, Tom. And that is a pool finance loan. Consider a VITA-sponsored bond with Muskoma Bank to provide long-term financing for the pool in the amount of $5 million.
So this is a great deal for us. About a year ago, when the pool was voted on, the mayor recommended that we get in contact with VITA, and that VITA can be a conduit for issuing debt through the city. So we worked on that. Now that we're at the debt issuance stage, we worked with VITA, and then a month ago put out an RFP to all the banks to get some long-term cash for the city. And the interest rates, I expected them to be good, but I thought they were astoundingly good. 2.14% fixed rate for 25 years. It's pretty darn good. So the VITA relationship has been pretty fruitful. So if the council would approve this, we could issue that debt through VITA probably in about a month to 6 weeks and have the pool financing behind us.
And can you just clarify for the board and the public that I received no commission whatsoever?
Correct. No commitment. So this rate is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Unbelievable.
I move that we approve the VITA-sponsored bond with Muskoma Bank to provide long-term financing for the pool for the amount of $5 million at 2.14%.
I second.
And just for the minutes, can I get a please a motion to move to allow me to sign the documents
So
on
we'll
behalf of the city?
sign the documents. I will add that. Are you okay with that?
So we have a motion to approve the financing package along with Tom signing the documents as needed. Anyone have any other questions on this? Cheap money is right there. No questions, comments? We'll turn to online. If you have a question or comment, please raise your hand. Seeing none or hearing none, all those in favor of the approval of the loan with Tom signing documents, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion passes. Thank you, Tom. You're gonna have to sleep in the morning, Tom, I'm keeping you busy here. Moving on to item number 9, regarding 54 and 5658 North Main Street loan. Tom, we'll turn it over to you.
So-
Consider a loan for the acquisition redevelopment.
Mike said it perfect last time, sheet money. When an item of this size is not warned and it's approved by the council to buy real estate, I need some sort of a voice vote, just so I can issue debt on this. So all these sort of redevelopment projects start with just a short-term line of credit that we take out and only use if we need it. And then cheap money, you just saw what we can get for long-term debt. So this is really just the authorization to allow for me to engage with a local bank to issue the short-term debt for now, and then the long-term would come back to you later if there is a long-term.
Any questions for Tom? Entertain the motion.
I move that we approve the $400,000 loan for acquisition and redevelopment 54, 56, and 58 North Main Street. Tom, do you want to sign that document as well?
Yes, I don't need that in a minute.
Okay, so I will end it with that then.
So we have a motion,
Second.
second by Mike. Any questions for Tom or comments? Hearing none, we'll move to Zoom. Anyone have any questions? Seeing none or hearing none, all those in favor of approving this loan for the acquisition of redevelopment 54, 56, and 58 North Main Street, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. We're moving on to Kingman Street. This one, I think we're getting a refund, Tom, right?
This is a bit of an odd duck. So Kingman Street included $555,000 of underground work, which went through the state revolving loan funds. And of that, about 3.25 was forgiven. So we had approval to borrow the full 555. That was on the warning a couple years ago, and we didn't need that full approval. Now the underground portion of the project has come in over budget. And Chip can give you some of those details as to what happened during the course of the project. So we can go back to the state revolving loan funds and borrow for that addition. And we're still within the original amount of the project, so we're not over budget. We have to go back to the city council to, in essence, borrow what we always planned. So we planned to borrow 555. We didn't need it at first because some of it was forgiven. Now we got to go back and borrow some more. We don't have those exact numbers yet because Chip is still working with the engineers on the final project to get a matter of it's not that we don't have the numbers, but the state has to go through every invoice line by line to determine what's underground work and what's above ground work. So we essentially have to come back to you to have your approval to borrow funds that you already approved and the voters approved. But that's the way it works. Is that confusing? Because it confused me.
So
And it still does.
we're $323,500 over budget,
No.
but someone gave us $350,000.
It's a good way to think of it.
So we're 26.5 up, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but the cost of the project was 325 over, just we had some of that given to us as a grant.
And we won't need the full 325, we don't believe. Chip, do you have a better estimate for what we'll need to go back to the state for?
I think we should be ready to go back for all
For all of
of
it?
it. What we're really gonna be doing is taking advantage of the total $550,000 debt that the voters authorized, as well as the subsidy that the SRS gave us as a favor to not have to take that money out. But we shouldn't leave any money on the table, whether it be a loan authorization or a grant. And the state says, well, we know the voters authorized you to do the $500,000 in debt, but we gave you part of it as a grant. We're not going to let you use it all as debt as well unless you just bring it back before the council one more time to say, yes, we would like to use the full debt authorization plus the grant subsidy that you got. That's really what's being brought before the council tonight. So this way we don't leave any money on the table, whether it be the loan or the grant. And the project could use it, because what we spend this money on, we won't have to spend tip for some other local source. So we might as well spend the SRF loan and grants.
Any questions for Chip or Tom? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve the authorization to borrow the balance of the revolving loan fund.
For $323,500.
Second.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Mike. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. I think you've been relieved of your duties.
Sounds good.
We're moving to item number 11 on the agenda, which is second reading of the planned unit development rule. Chip Sawyer is joining us to have this discussion.
Thank you. Planning Commission rewrote our planned unit development rule to be a little more reflective of the kind of development that happens in the city and to fix a couple of problems. Typically, a planned unit development rule in the state is a zoning rule, and it allows you to have a little bit more flexibility in what you allow to happen on a parcel, mostly to let development be a little bit more dense and clustered, and to save more of the land for working landscape, common land, forest, something like that. So say you have a town that has 10-acre zoning, like 10 acres per house. A lot of towns that have that in the state. And if I was a farmer and I wanted to leave most of my land in production, but I needed to make a little bit of money, and sell some of my land, but not sell huge 10-acre chunks and take them out of production, I could use the planning and development rule to have my town allow me to sell little half-acre parcels or acre parcels on a section of it, and then leave the rest of it on my farm or common land for the development or stormwater or what have you. And typically, that's the way most planned unit development rules are written. And there's a little bit of evidence in the city's zoning rules that we kind of took that cookie cutter and just put it in. You know, every town should have planned unit development rules, so we just grabbed it and put it in our zoning. But we don't have 10-acre zoning. We don't have 10-acre lots. We have a different form of development in the city. And there were a couple other issues. For instance, there's still a need for something like a planned unit development rule in the city that might allow the DRB to be a little bit more flexible in a certain case, maybe allow a higher density. So we could use the PUD for that. But because it's a rule that's normally used on large lots, our rule requires you to have 3 times as much land as you need to do what you want to do. Now, why would I need a density bonus on a lot that already has 3 times as much land as I need to do what I want to do? Also, as currently written, you know, the DRB is given a lot of leeway to forgive setbacks or parking or lot coverages or allow densities to a certain up to 25%. The Planning Commission felt there could be a little bit more direction in terms of predictability. What should I ask the DRB to grant my project? What is the DRB allowed to do? And just make for a smoother permanent process if I want to bring a PUD before the city. There's a function of our PUD rule that forces every mobile home park to be a PUD, even if they wouldn't need to under our current density rules. So that's just unnecessary. If a mobile home park thinks they need to come in as a PUD, then they should be able to, but we shouldn't force everyone to go through as one if they wouldn't need it. And then, quite frankly, the Planning Commission felt that it should be rewritten to be more reflective of the infill development that you see in the city. Most development in the city is allowed at 1 unit per 1/8 of an acre or 1/4 acre. So the Planning Commission basically rewrote the entire rule. This is the second reading, and it does a few things. it proposes that the PUD rule be eligible for residential lots that are adjacent to commercial zones. So you could do something like a transitional development, where I'm right next to a business district, but I'm in the low density residential district. Maybe I can do a little something more dense on my lot that's reflective of the residential district, but still sort of blending into the residential lots that surround me. The proposed rule also gives better direction for the DRB and when they can allow or request certain waivers, such as setbacks and lot coverages, and it really has to do with what's around the lot. If your next door neighbor is allowed to have a 5-foot setback, then you can have a 5-foot setback on that side too. But if your zone and everyone else has a 15-foot setback, well then on that side you have to maintain that 15-foot setback. So basically each of your neighbors you would give them the setback that they have to give you on their side. And lot coverages too. If you're adjacent to a commercial lot, you could have a slightly higher lot coverage. Density bonuses would be allowed for 1-bedroom units, and the PC set a limit to how much less parking the DRB can require per unit. There isn't really much direction in the current PUD rule as it's written, so they thought they should add a little bit of a limit. And the DRB is now allowed to approve shared facilities like driveways to enable denser development. Most of the actual strike through, the underlying language, the struck out language, is the new rewritten rule, and then the rest of the sections of the proposed amendment are just making changes to other sections of zoning that reference the PUD rule, so that everything's in agreement, there are no contradictions with how it's supposed to be used. And that's basically the proposed amendment.
Any questions of Chip? This is second reading.
Mm-hmm.
I move that we adopt the planned unit development rules that Chip presented.
Second.
No motion second. Motion by Chad, seconded by Mike. Any other questions? Any questions online? Seeing none, hearing none, all those in favor of approving the planned unit development? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the planned unit development rule passes. Moving on, Chip, first reading of technical corrections. So Chip is passing around the signature page. We'll sign that, get it back to you, Chip.
Thank you.
So let's do the technical corrections.
Had some communications with one of our police officers who said there was a typo in our current traffic ordinances that was being used in court to waive some tickets because, quite frankly, our rule for not taking a right turn at the bottom of Fairfield Street referenced, actually I gotta make sure I get this one right. Okay, here it is. Right now, our rule that you can't take a right turn off of Fairfield Street on the red light says you can't take it onto North Main Street. Well, North Main Street actually ends at the American House. And that section in front of Rail City Market is South Main Street. So I promised that police officer that eventually we'd get around to correcting that typo. and I asked, could we just call it Main Street? He's like, no, it has to be south or north, it has to be specific. Like, whatever, okay. When the city council has some time, we'll bring it before them. And I went through and I corrected a couple other typos. None of these changes have any policy implication. They're all just corrections. So I'm proposing that we make that correction for the name of South Main Street. That we remove a reference to a left turn lane at Main and Congress because it no longer exists. That we remove reference to no parking on Fairfield Street above Lincoln Ave on Sundays because we already have a general restriction that there's no parking on either side of Fairfield Street north of Lincoln Ave elsewhere in the regs. I've removed the police vehicle parking space in front of City Hall because it's not there anymore. And, oh yes, I just made sure that the list of city parking lots now acknowledges that there's a parking garage in lot 1, and that it's not just a lot. This is the first reading of these technical corrections.
Whoever found the North and South Main loophole, Tim, are you looking for an intern? That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That is pretty good.
So, can I just have clarification on the parking lot one where, we eliminated other vehicles may park in those between 6 and 6 AM, so are we saying that that doesn't hold through?
Basically, that's governed a little differently in each lot, so we're gonna let the signage do that for each lot, rather than have this blanket rule. Yeah, each lot's a little different in terms of the 6 PM to 6 AM, or some are 5 PM, each lot's a little different.
But ultimately, people
Because-
can park there after.
yeah, because there are
business hours, right?
There are other blanket rules in the ordinance that if the city manager puts up a sign, you need to obey it, so we'll just let that apply in our parking lots.
So that's the first reading of that, we'll see you next
Happens all the
month.
time.
We'll see you next month to finalize
Yeah.
that. Good, any questions for Chip on any of that? No. Moving forward to item number 14, certification of highway financial plan and road standards / inventory.
We, for class 2 highway funding, we need to certify that we adopted the latest state road and highway standards. We did that in July of 19, so the first page of this just certifies that we did that, and that we have a road inventory. And then every year, we need to send a report to the state on how much we're spending on our roads. And Tom and I just populated that form based on the latest budget. So there are 2 places for you to sign. Actually, I think I'll separate this one so you make sure you don't. There are 2 sheets to sign for this.
While you're doing that, Chip, can you give us a refresher, give a couple examples of the class 1, 2, and 3 roads?
Class 1 road is any numbered state or US route that the city's taking over. So Route 7, Main Street, Route 36, Fairfield and Lake, Route 38, Lower Newton Street. Those are federal or state routes, but we've adopted them, which means that we maintain them. We actually still get money from the state to help maintain them, but we maintain them. We also get a certain level of control over them, posting the speed limits, how we want our sidewalks to look, where we want to plant trees, all that stuff. That's a class 1 road. The class 2 roads are any town highway that go between different class 1 roads. So Congress Street's a class 2 road because it connects Route 7 to Route 104. Yeah. Upper Weldon is a class 2 road. Route 7 to 105. North Elm. Yeah. And class 3 roads are all the other city streets.
Thank you for that. So,
Looks like we just need to sign it.
you don't need a motion to accept that? Or we
It wouldn't hurt.
Okay. Entertain a motion to approve the certification of highway financial plan and road standards.
I'll second.
And Marie, you're first.
Oh, okay, well, I'll make that.
Marie's first, Chad second.
Sorry.
Any other questions, comments for Chip? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. We got 2 sheets coming around to sign off on.
Try and fit in up here because they didn't give us quite enough time.
Okay, Chip, I think, right, nothing else for us?
No. I'm ready to assist Council Member McCarthy with the awards discussion.
Yeah, he'll be reading the resolution soon.
I think we might summarize and incorporate by reference.
It's like second
So
grade all over.
Chip, thanks for your time, appreciate it. Moving on to item number 15, which is the reapportionment of city wards. Councilman McCarthy will be addressing that. And let me first say, Mike has put in countless hours into this, on multiple fronts, whether it's here at the BCA meeting or at the State House. So thank you for your time to make this. This was a concern based on the wards and the different populations over time. So thanks for taking this on, and we think it'll be a great solution. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
Yeah, so if you haven't heard the spiel yet, I'll summarize what we're trying to do here briefly. And would it make sense to just put the map up, Chip?
Yeah, let me just pull something together while you keep talking.
So I think most people in the city are familiar with the pink ward map that was adopted December 9th, 1968 by the City Council. And in our city charter, it says that we have the authority, either by resolution or by ordinance, to change the ward boundaries from time to time. But if we do make a change, that they shall not be amended any more than every 5 years. Well, we took that really seriously, and we haven't done it since 1968. And so last summer, I had mentioned when we were doing our priority setting, our goal setting session, that because the census was coming out and we would have a better sense of the population of the neighborhoods in the city, and that the legislature would be taking up the legislative reapportionment, where we do the similar process for all of the 150 House seats and the 30 Senate seats, that this would be a pretty good time to take it up this year. And I thought maybe we'd do it this summer, after the legislative redistricting, but when the maps came out last fall, it became pretty clear that if the Board of Civil Authority and the community wanted to divide our current 2-seat House district into 2 single-seat House districts, so that there would be a split in the bottom part of the city somewhere, that it was going to divide at least one or both of wards 5 and 6 potentially, and that just seemed really awkward. One of the statutory requirements for the legislative process is that we seek to maintain existing political subdivisions. So when we got the census data and I looked at the maps as close as we can, the census blocks don't exactly follow the lines that we had. For instance, Ward 1, based on the 1968 map, has both the south and north side of Congress Street, just one example. Whereas the census block is right down the middle of the street in most cases, or with a natural boundary like the Stevens Brook. So if you get as close as you can to the current map using the census block data that was compiled by the federal government for 2020, you end up with some pretty extreme deviations. So Ward 4, for instance, my ward had 925 people, and Ward 5 had 1,377, a net 40% deviation between away from what would be sort of an ideal number. So I discussed this briefly with a few folks on the council, and then I put together a draft map. I've got a little bit of feedback on it back in January and made some edits. And so you can see here the side-by-side of my original or amended proposal that I did at the end of January after getting a little bit of feedback from folks about where it would make sense. And this evens out things pretty well. Ward 1 and Ward 6 were kind of the closest to that ideal 1,146 number. The residents in the ward, so you take the total population and divide that by the 6 wards to get 1,146 is the ideal number. And so the Ward 1 is largely what it is today, but it's just the north side of Congress Street, and then it picks up about 120 people across Main Street, bounded by the Lower Newton Road and Stevens Brook there in that census block. Ward 4, to balance out the deviation with Ward 5, picks up a couple blocks south of Fairfield Street. in this map. Ward 6 is largely the same, although now the boundary is just down the center line of Edward Street, and at the very end of Edward Street, it divides there's two properties there along the town line that are the dividing line. Ward 2 flip-flops a little bit with Ward 3 to make some more clean boundaries with using Cedar Street and Edward Street. And then Ward 3 kind of keeps the main chunk of it, but loses that part that was south of Lake Street and picks up a couple blocks that are downtown. So we've had folks looking at this for a couple months. I did a presentation for many of the folks who were coming by to vote on town meeting day and received mostly curiosity. Haven't heard anything terribly negative about it, but you know, after 53 plus years, change could be hard, so.
And it was discussed at our last meeting as well, right? So I think it's been vetted pretty well. Did you receive any adverse comments, or was it people were understandable?
No, people were curious about it, but I really didn't hear anybody who said, no, this is a terrible idea, or this doesn't make any sense. I think the general sense was that we should have evenly populated wards, and this is the way to achieve it with, I think, the least amount of change, and to use the census blocks. You know, I'm not sure what they used exactly to determine the population back in 1968, because it doesn't seem to reflect the census blocks at all.
It wasn't census blocks, because census blocks have used roads for boundaries for even before the 1960 census.
Yeah, so they may have used, allowed occupancy or some estimate of how many people they thought, or, some kind of a manual head count or something.
Checklist.
Yeah, they could have used the checklist, but then they would have had to do it by voters and not by residents. And, since that time, with the one person, one vote court case in the 60s, it's really been understood to be that it should be the population, not the voters. So they may have used the voters as opposed to the actual population back in 1968. So there is a very lengthy resolution. I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if you want to read the enacting clauses and skip the word descriptions, that would be appropriate.
I just have one comment. So I haven't heard too much on the ward, the way the wards have been divvied up. I haven't heard too much on that. It just, the thing is, it had to be done. And now is a good time to do it, because the way our BCA basically said, hey, we want to go one district, one representative. So every district only has one representative. So right now, the city and a chunk of the town have Mike and Casey. And when they wanted to divvy that up, Ward 6 was going to basically be split in half. I think Ward 5 was kind of funky around Ward 5 too.
Just to clarify, state representation.
State representation, not here. So thankfully Mike pushed it forward, so although it's going to be a little odd, I have heard the comment that, now Ward 5 and 6 are going to be with the town. Well, they're not. Technically there's 4,400 people in a district, is that?
That's about right.
So although wards 1 through 4 are fully the city, and the town has one full representative, except this little southern chunk, which is basically going to be half town, half city. So it's not like the city folks are getting looped in with the town folks, or the town folks are being grouped in with the city folks. It's kind of like our own little district. And it does make sense, because that chunk, there's a lot of stuff that happens in that little chunk that's very relative. So I'm much more in tune on what's happening on, for an example, Fairfax Street than I may be at the end of Lakeview, like Terrace or something like that. So it just made sense. So that was the only comment I've heard, and I don't like being told that the Ward 5 and 6 is being thrown into town, because they're not. We're going to have a representative that has both town and city in about the equal amount.
another way to say it that I think is easy to understand is that if you look at the town and the city populations together, they have the right number for 3 state representatives in the House. And so it's hard to divide 2 communities by 3. I've seen some pretty weird maps that actually have like a pie wedge kind of a thing where they're all hybrid city-town districts. I think that would be really hard to administer for the clerks in both of the municipalities. So what this does is it says wards 1 through 4, you're a legislative district with 1 representative. Wards 5 and 6 have about 2,200 people, a little more, and there's about 2,200 people from the town in that southern neighborhood. So it's half and half. So there's a split district, and then the rest of St. Albans town is also a 1-seat district, and that's how you get the 3 St. Albans representatives from out of this map. And so the Ward 5 and 6 are going to be completely in that new, I think it's going to be Franklin 8 district, and then the Franklin 3 district is just wards 1 through 4.
So just a couple of things quickly, Don, there's some logistical things, right? We have a couple maps in the city hall that show the old one, right, after you replace. I think you have a ton of copies that need to be changed as well.
Before the next election, where it's in, we will make sure that we update the list of what's your address and what ward are you in. We'll get the new maps up. We'll get the word out.
Yeah, that was my concern, was for the next election, people will be coming in and saying, well, what do you mean? I used to be in Ward 3, now I'm in Ward 2 or something like that, so.
Happens every election anyway.
Yeah. It does, but.
I'm sorry, you're right in the middle of Ward 1. I don't know what to tell you. Although we did have someone come in last election and they both lived in the same household, and one was in Ward 1 and one was in like Ward 2 or 3 or something. And it was, split the bed right in half, I guess.
So we do have the resolution to approve. I'll just read the whereas portion. We won't get into the full thing. Whereas.
Could I request that you maybe skip the word descriptions, but please read the last resolve clause, because I'd like that read into the record. That's important for us to avoid this happening again.
You're referring to me?
Yeah, this one down here.
Oh, okay. Whereas the St. Albans City Charter states that the City Council is empowered to make such changes from time to time by resolution or ordinance in the number and boundaries of the several wards of the city as it may deem proper. And whereas the last city ward boundary reapportionment was adopted by the City Council December 9th, 1968 on a motion by Jim Pelkey. Whereas analysis of the 2020 decennial U.S. Census block data shows significant population deviations between the existing wards in the 1968 ward boundaries map, and whereas 2020 U.S. Census blocks can be assembled with redistricting data tools to produce wards with more acceptable degrees of deviation between total resident population. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council hereby reapportions the 6th city ward effectively, immediately, and as stated by Councilman McCarthy. Be it further resolved that the City Council shall reapportion the city wards within 1 year of the release of the decennial U.S. Census data and not less than every 10 years. However, this current resolution to reapportionment that the city wards shall remain in effect until such time that a new resolution to reapportion the city wards is ordained. So with that said, look for a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mike, seconded by Chad, to approve the City Council resolution to reapportion the city wards. Any other questions?
I just want to thank Mike for doing a lot of work on this.
Fine, thank you.
One thing, other thing I would say is I want to thank Chip for doing the eagle eye editing on all of the crazy word descriptions. He put a lot of work into that, and for Don and Chip reaching out to the regional planning helped us with this map. So they took the thing I did online and turned it into a really beautiful map that I think will stand the test of time. So thank you for working with them on that.
I said, give us like a 10-year map, not something that's really good.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the reapportionment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. And we have another signature request from Chip.
Sorry, Wade, you're in the Marines district now.
Yeah.
So we're gonna move on to first reading, amendment to Title 22, water and wastewater allocations. We're gonna turn that over to our city manager, Don.
Thank you. I think we can talk about items 16 and 17 in tandem, and then when it comes time, for motions, I'm so inclined to have two separate motions. This is the first time we have opened up the city ordinances for how we govern water and wastewater allocations in some time. And this deals with the process for both in-city applications and extraterritorial applications. It's also the ordinance that gives rise to the affiliation fee program. These proposed changes mainly have three changes. The first is the requirement that approved affiliation fee agreements are recorded by the applicant. That's something that's come to light recently, that folks didn't realize their property was part of the affiliation fee program, so we've added the requirement that it be recorded. It's also come to light that it would be helpful if we send quarterly bills, so we've embedded that in the ordinance. And we've known for some time that when we drafted the ordinance, there was an oversight with the Route 7 North Sewer District. Route 7 North Sewer District is up around exit 20. On the back of this ordinance is a map of the district. And this was a wastewater district that was set up to allow the development of that area, in which the property owners in that district entered into an agreement to pay the debt service on the bonds that laid the infrastructure on the wastewater side. It never addressed the water side of the equation. And so this ordinance applies the affiliation fee program to new water allocations in the Route 7 North Sewer District. Does not apply to existing water allocations, applications that have been filed, or projects that have come online, and it doesn't apply to wastewater. It only applies to the water portion of new allocations within the Route 7 North Sewer District. Under the ordinance, on page 6, new construction or expansion of existing property requiring only water connection is 14 cents per 100 of appraised value. So that's the financial impact. That's the main ordinance, which I'd ask you to consider a motion to adopt. I'd ask you to consider a motion to accept first reading. The second item is the emergency ordinance, which is identical, substantially identical to the ordinance I just referenced. This is item 17, but this makes it effective immediately. Obviously, if we're changing the rules for allocations, and that's taking effect in the coming months, you don't want to set off a run on new allocations. So the emergency ordinance is a temporary ordinance that is good for 30 days, and traditionally will evaporate then, or will expire when the permanent ordinance takes effect at second reading.
Any questions for Don?
We don't need a motion to accept the first reading, but I will make a motion we adopt the emergency ordinance regarding affiliation fees for new water allocations in the Route 7 North Sewer District.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Any questions or comments on TV, on Zoom? Hearing none, motion on the floor by Chad, seconded by Mike. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, emergency ordinance regarding affiliation fee is passed. And we will have the second reading for the full ordinance at our April meeting. Okay. Move on to item number 18, Mayor's Report. Just a couple things. This Thursday, St. Patty's Day, parade downtown, starting at the courthouse at 5:30. Encourage anyone who would like to participate to join the rec department at the courthouse on Lake Street, and it will wrap up here at City Hall, where there'll be music and dancing and other activities. So this is back for the first time in 3 years. We missed two parades during COVID, and that's the same for the Maple Festival. It is back online for, I think, April 24th, 22nd to the 24th. And maybe it looked a little different, but once again, this is the first Maple Festival that we've been able to have over 3 years. And I'd also like to acknowledge a great event put on by the rec department as well for the father-daughter dance, which was sold out, and had great attendance and very well received throughout the community. So those were just a few things that I had. We'll go around and check in. Mr. Hawkins, we'll start with you.
Nothing new?
Mr. Hawkins is good. Let me just clarify for folks too, Dom. Some people may be wondering why we didn't do swearing in, but we all did do it at the time of appointing the new city clerk and treasurer, Arlie. So Newell did it, myself and Tim have already done it. So if anyone's wondering about that, that was addressed when we appointed Arlie as the interim city clerk.
So we don't have to go back and do this whole meeting again.
Right. Mike, do you have anything?
I wanted to give a report back because I knew there was some concern about a bill that would have really made it impossible for us to continue to provide water and wastewater hookups and sort of make the affiliation fee illegal. That was getting some testimony in the Senate, and while I know there are some folks who are in the situation where they're paying the affiliation fee that don't like it and the way it's structured, I think that none of us would want to go back to the days of a moratorium. And fortunately, with some advocacy this week, the committee declined to take the bill up for a vote, and it didn't make crossover. I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding sometimes in Montpelier about the disagreements that neighboring municipalities have over these kinds of issues, but I'm glad that we were able to continue the status quo, and I hope that eventually the city and town can come to an agreement that makes the affiliation fee a thing of the past. But for now, I think it's better to have the affiliation fee than a moratorium. We will continue to, I'm sure, have these discussions in the future, but for now, the state is not going to prevent us from maintaining the status quo.
Anything else, Mike?
That's all I got right now.
Thank you. Newell, we'll go to you. Do you have any questions, comments,
No.
concerns?
I'm observing, taking things in.
So just so folks know, we throw a lot at the new, whenever there's a new council person, so Dom and I will continue to meet with Newell to answer questions and educate about the topic, so.
Well, it's kind of interesting, you're doing pretty good on time, I see that.
Yeah, that's key. That's what, I gotta tell you, that's what got me reelected. Marie?
I have a couple of things. We're planning another neighborhood watch in our surrounding streets. And we're planning it for this coming Tuesday. We've got some stickers that I've ordered that should be in a couple of days to pass out, to put on our door windows, neighborhood watch. We all watch to prevent crime. So that's one thing we've got going, and things have been relatively quiet. Haven't heard many complaints down my end, so that's a good thing. I do have one comment, probably for Marty. I took a little, I tried out for the Olympics and speed skating, and I failed. And I took a fall on the ice, but the one thing that I noticed before I didn't realize what had happened was the walk and don't walk sign on the corner of Lake and Main, the one that points towards the park, is when you're coming down, go straight down Lake, is turned a bit. It's pointing more towards that hope sign than it is the actual crosswalk. So I think it just needs some tightening or something, but
That's your last memory, huh?
that is very much my last memory, and then after that, who knows what happened.
So Marty, just to that point, someone also mentioned to me the pedestrian button at the corner of Newton and Main does not seem to be working as well, so if you could.
Okay, we can take a look at both of those tomorrow.
If you would, thank you. Mr. Spooner?
Marty, while you're there, thank you for taking the picnic table out of the brook, that was appreciated. Before it clogged up and.
Waterfront dining, Jack.
It was waterfront dining. Dominic, thank you for making sure the Jira windows got cleaned. Those were cleaned the other day, much appreciated. I want to thank the Community Justice Center. I had a question about driving with licenses suspended last meeting, and they put some information in there this week, which was really good and helpful, and just allows me to see what's going on with that, so that was helpful. And then the last thing I just want to say, and I'm going to ignore the sheer irony that that the BEI committee, someone recommended they vote someone off the island before even meeting them. What I want to do is, that brings up the question, I know a couple times since I've been here, we've done a BLCT meeting, like a training. Obviously, members of a committee cannot vote appointed members of a committee, so it might just be good. I know we have a new city council member as well. I've done it both times we've had it. I've really enjoyed the training, so maybe we can look at BLCT if they can give us do that training again. I think it was an hour and a half, something like that.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
All set? I think that's.
Motion to approve warrants 2/28/22.
Get some back. We have a motion to approve warrants from 2/28. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mike, motion by Tim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Moving to the minutes.
I'll move to approve regular meeting minutes for 1/10/22.
Second.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Mike for minutes from 1/10/22. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Abstention, Ward 1.
Abstention, Ward 1. Okay, regular meeting minutes from 2/14/22.
I'll move to approve those as well.
Second.
Motion by Chad, seconded by Mike. Any comments, corrections, amendments?
Abstention by Ward 3.
Abstention by Ward 3
And Ward 1.
and Ward 1. All those in favor of approval of 2/14 minutes?
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Special meeting 2/21/22. Is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Motion by
Second.
Chad, seconded by Mike. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I wasn't here.
Abstention, Ward 1.
Abstention, Ward 1.
February's a rough month for me.
What's that?
February was a rough month.
Abstention from Ward 2 as well, and from the mayor, and Ward 1.
Motion to approve meeting 3/4/22.
There we go.
Second.
Yeah.
Motion by Tim, seconded by Chad, to approve minutes. Is there any corrections, amendments?
No, we barely made it through 2 months, Tim. I'm gonna let you know, we barely. We just sat here for 10 minutes and didn't know what to do.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, special meeting minutes from 3/4 passes unanimously. So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Chad,
Second.
second by Marie. Thank you all. Newell, welcome. Don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have questions. And we will continue to work to educate you as we progress, but